I had just pulled out of the estate attorney's parking lot when my phone lit up with a text from my older brother. "We're all at Dad's house. Come straight here. We need to talk about next steps." I remember staring at that message at the red light, my eyes still swollen from 3 days of crying, thinking that maybe, just maybe, my family was finally ready to grieve together. My father had died 4 days earlier from a stroke, and I had spent those days completely alone in my apartment, calling my brother every few hours only to get his voicemail. Now, suddenly, he wanted to talk. I drove the 20 minutes to my father's house on autopilot, still clutching the sealed envelope the attorney had handed me before I left his office. Inside that envelope was a certified copy of my father's estate documents. I had not opened it yet. I told myself I would wait until I got home, until I had a glass of water and a quiet moment. But as I turned onto my father's street and saw 3 unfamiliar cars parked in the driveway alongside my brother's SUV, something cold and sharp moved through my chest. My father had been dead for 4 days, and I was just now being invited over. I parked at the curb and sat in my car for a moment. The living room lights were on. I could see movement through the large front window. I grabbed my purse, tucked the envelope under my arm, and walked up the front path I had walked 1,000 times as a kid. I had my own key, the one my father had given me the year I moved out, the one I had kept on my keychain for the last 7 years because taking it off felt like admitting something I was not ready to admit. I slid it into the lock. The moment the door opened, I heard laughter. Not quiet, subdued laughter. Not the kind of awkward, exhausted laughter that people sometimes use to cut through grief. This was loud and comfortable, and completely at home in a house where someone had just died. I recognized my brother's deep, rolling laugh immediately. And then I heard my sister-in-law's voice, sharp and bright and absolutely delighted about something. I stepped into the foyer and froze. There were people in the living room I had never seen before. 2 men in polo shirts with matching lanyards hanging around their necks, sitting on my late father's couch with open laptops. My brother was standing at the fireplace, a glass of bourbon in his hand, gesturing at something on one of the screens. I stayed completely still in the shadow of the hallway. Nobody had heard the door open. My sister-in-law was seated at my father's dining room table with a real estate agent I recognized from the yard signs in the neighborhood, and she was flipping through what looked like a property valuation report. She reached across the table and tapped a number on the page. "We could list it by the end of the month if we move fast," she said. "The market is insane right now. His commercial building downtown will go quickly too. My brother-in-law has the contacts." The real estate agent nodded and wrote something down. My father had not been buried for a week. His chair still had the dent from where he used to sit every evening. His reading glasses were still folded on the side table next to the lamp. "My name is Claire. I am 31 years old, and I am a senior cybersecurity architect at a firm in downtown Chicago. My father spent 22 years building a mid-size logistics company from nothing, and he did it while raising 2 kids mostly alone after my mother passed when I was 9. My brother is 5 years older than me. He dropped out of college, bounced between sales jobs for a decade, and eventually landed as a regional manager at a company his wife's family helped him get into. He and I had never been close. My father loved us both, but I was the one who visited every Sunday. I was the one who drove him to his cardiology appointments. I was the one who sat with him in the hospital the night his blood pressure spiked last January, and he made me promise to take care of the company if anything ever happened to him. My brother sent a flower arrangement. Standing in that hallway listening to his wife plan the liquidation of everything my father spent his life building, I felt something go very still inside me. The grief did not disappear. It transformed. It sharpened into something cold and precise and completely focused. I thought about the envelope under my arm. I thought about what the attorney had told me when he handed it to me, lowering his voice slightly, even though we were alone in his office. "Your father updated his estate documents 14 months ago, Claire. The company, the commercial property on Wacker, and the majority of his liquid assets are left to you. There is a modest provision for your brother, but you are the primary beneficiary." He had paused before adding, "I want you to know this because I have reason to believe someone may have already contacted you with conflicting information." I had not understood what he meant at the time. I understood it now perfectly. I took a slow breath. I let my shoulders drop. I let my face go soft and crumpled. the way it genuinely looked when I had been crying for 3 days, which was not difficult. And then I pushed the living room door open and walked into the room like a woman who had absolutely no idea what was about to happen. My brother turned first. For a half second, something flickered across his face that was not grief and was not surprise. It was something much closer to calculation. Then it was gone, replaced by the big, warm performance of a concerned older brother. He crossed the room and pulled me into a hug that lasted exactly 2 seconds too long to be comfortable. "There she is," he said, his voice carrying easily to the men with the laptops. Come in. We were just starting to sort some things out." My sister-in-law looked up from the table and gave me a smile that did not reach her eyes. "We figured it would be easier to start while emotions are still manageable," she said. "There's a lot to deal with." She was wearing a necklace I had seen many times before, a thin gold chain with a small sapphire pendant. It had been my mother's. My father kept it in his dresser. He had told me once that he planned to give it to me when the time was right. My sister-in-law was wearing it now, the day before my father's funeral, sitting in his dining room discussing property valuations. I stared at that necklace for exactly 3 seconds. Then I looked away before she could see what was in my eyes. My brother steered me to the couch and sat down beside me. He asked one of the polo shirt men to give us some privacy, and they packed up their laptops and moved into the kitchen. The real estate agent quietly collected her papers and stepped outside to take a call. My sister-in-law stayed at the table, pretending to read something on her phone. My brother put his hand on my knee. He looked at me with an expression that I think was supposed to communicate deep, brotherly compassion. "I know this is hard," he started. "It's hard for both of us. But I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear me out before you react." He reached into the leather portfolio on the coffee table and slid out a document. "Dad updated his will 3 months ago. I was there. He was worried about you. He thought you were spreading yourself too thin with work and he didn't want the company to become a burden after he was gone. He left the business to me to manage and liquidate, and he left you a cash distribution from the proceeds. About $200,000, after debts are settled." He set the document on my knee. "I know it's not what you expected, but this is what he wanted." I looked down at the papers. The signature on the last page was my father's name, but I had watched my father sign documents my entire life. I knew the particular way he looped the C in his last name, the way he always underlined his signature twice, a habit he picked up from his own father. The signature on this document had one underline, thin and straight and slightly tilted. I had spent the last 8 years of my career detecting digital forgeries, manipulated metadata, and spoofed authentication trails. I could identify a fabricated document the way a musician can hear a single off note in a chord. This will had been forged. Not badly, but not well enough. I did not say any of this out loud. I picked up the document and held it in my hands, and I let my lower lip tremble slightly. "I don't understand," I said, my voice coming out small and confused. "Dad never mentioned this to me." My brother sighed like he had been expecting exactly that response. "He didn't want to upset you while things were okay. But Claire, the company has problems. It's not as healthy as he made it seem. There are debts, vendor contracts that are underwater, employees whose benefits are a liability. I've had our accountant look at the books." He gestured toward the kitchen, where one of the polo shirt men was presumably still sitting. "The honest truth is that a fast sale is the best outcome for everyone. You walk away with cash in hand and no headaches. I handle the hard part." My sister-in-law looked up from her phone. "You've always been better at the work side of things anyway," she said, as if this were a compliment. "Let him deal with the business stuff. You don't need that stress." I nodded slowly. I brought my hands to my face and let out a long, unsteady exhale. "Can I have a few days before we make any decisions?" I asked. "I just need to process everything." My brother's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course," he said. "Take a day or two. But we need signatures on the estate documents pretty soon for the probate process to start. The attorney needs them by the end of the week." He tapped the forged will. "I can bring these by tomorrow." What my brother did not know, and what I was careful not to let show on my face, was that I had installed the smart home security system in my father's house myself 3 years ago. I had done it as a birthday gift, because my father kept forgetting to lock the garage and I worried about him living alone. I had configured every camera, every motion sensor, and every audio-enabled device in that house personally. I still had full administrative access from my own phone. The cameras were running. They had been running since the moment I walked through the door, and the audio quality in the living room was exceptional because I had specifically upgraded the microphone sensitivity in the smoke detector above the couch the previous Christmas. I had already texted my attorney from the car. I left my father's house 30 minutes later with the forged document tucked into my bag, having promised my brother I would review everything carefully. He walked me to my car and hugged me again at the curb. He smelled like my father's bourbon. As I pulled away, I could see him in my rearview mirror, already pulling out his phone before he was even back inside. I drove 2 blocks, pulled over, and finally opened the envelope from the estate attorney. I read the first 2 pages very carefully. Then I called him directly. He answered on the first ring, and I told him that my brother had just presented me with an alternate will claiming to have been executed 3 months ago. The attorney was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. "That document does not exist in our records," he said. "Your father made no changes to his estate in the last 14 months. Whatever your brother showed you is not legitimate." "I know," I said. "I just needed you to confirm it." What followed over the next 5 days was the most carefully controlled performance of my adult life. My brother called every morning. He texted links to articles about probate timelines. His wife sent me a care package with a candle and a card that said, "Thinking of you during this difficult season," signed with both their names and a small hand-drawn heart. Meanwhile, I spent my evenings in my home office, doing what I do for a living. I pulled every publicly accessible document tied to my brother's finances, cross-referencing his business registration records with state tax filings and property databases. What I found was not a surprise, exactly, but it was worse than I had anticipated. My brother's company had been on the edge of insolvency for nearly 2 years. He had taken out a second lien against his house the previous spring. He had 3 outstanding judgments from former business partners. His income for the previous tax year, which I accessed through a carefully worded public records request, was less than $40,000. He needed my father's assets to survive. Not in a general sense, but urgently, in the way that someone needs water when they are already 31 miles into the desert. I also pulled the digital metadata from the forged will using a forensic software tool I kept licensed through my firm. The document had been created on a standard word processor 9 days before my father's death. The font was close, but not identical to the letterhead my father's real attorney used. The notary stamp had been replicated from a public document, a technique I had seen in 3 corporate fraud cases in the past year alone. My brother had not done this himself. He was not technically capable. Someone had helped him. But the fingerprints, digitally speaking, led directly back to his home printer. I compiled everything into a secure encrypted folder and shared it with the estate attorney and with a probate litigation specialist he referred me to. Then I sat back and waited for the next move. It came faster than I expected. On the 6th day after my father's funeral, my brother arrived at my apartment unannounced at 7 in the evening. He was not alone. He had brought my aunt with him, my father's younger sister, a woman who had inserted herself into every family conflict for as long as I could remember, and who had a particular gift for making her opinions sound like objective truth. They sat on my couch, and my aunt reached over and held my hand. And she looked at me with an expression of absolute loving concern, while my brother explained that the estate attorney had flagged a discrepancy between the 2 wills and that things were about to become legally complicated. "The attorney is trying to drag this out to bill more hours," my brother said, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "That's what these guys do. But if you just sign over your claim to the estate administration to me, we can settle this privately without lawyers fighting over it for 2 years. He slid a document across my coffee table. It was a simple-looking form, 2 pages, with a line at the bottom for my signature. It authorized him as sole estate administrator with full discretionary authority over all assets. "It's just paperwork," he said. "I'm still going to take care of you. The $200,000 is still yours." My aunt squeezed my hand. "He's trying to protect you from the stress of all this," she said. "You've been through so much already. Let him carry this." I looked at the form. I looked at my brother. I looked at my aunt in her expensive blouse, her reading glasses pushed up on her head, radiating the particular energy of someone who has decided she is the reasonable one in any room. And I thought about something my father had said to me once when I was maybe 14 and upset about something my brother had done. He had looked at me over the top of his own reading glasses and said, "Claire, the most powerful thing you can do when someone underestimates you is let them keep doing it." I picked up the pen from my coffee table. I signed the form, but the signature I used was not my legal signature. It was a variant I had registered with my bank's fraud protection department 3 years earlier during a professional development seminar on identity theft prevention. A specific alteration to the angle of my capital C, a deliberate break in the loop of my last name, documented and filed with a timestamp. Any document bearing that signature would automatically flag as a fraudulent submission in any federally insured institution's system. I had never had occasion to use it before that evening. I pressed the pen to the paper and used it now, calmly, with my aunt still holding my other hand. My brother picked up the signed form and slid it into his leather portfolio, his shoulders visibly relaxed. "Good," he said, standing up. "This is the right call. I'll get things moving this week." My aunt leaned over and kissed my cheek. "Your father would be proud of you for keeping things peaceful," she said. After they left, I sat alone in my apartment for a few minutes in complete silence. Then I opened my laptop, logged into the secure client portal for the estate attorney, and uploaded the time-stamped registration documents for the fraud alert signature. I sent a brief message to the probate litigation attorney. "They have a signed form. It will fail authentication at any bank. Let them try to use it." His response came 11 minutes later. "Understood. I'll prepare the counterfiling. They won't know until they're already on the record." The next 3 days were a study in restraint. My brother texted cheerfully about logistics. His wife posted a photo on her social media of fresh flowers in what was clearly my father's kitchen, with a caption about honoring a beautiful legacy. My aunt called twice to check on me, her version of checking on me being mostly talking about herself for 20 minutes and then asking if I had signed anything else yet. Meanwhile, I reviewed every document in my father's business files, which he had kept in a shared cloud drive that I had set up for him 2 years ago and still had full access to. The company was not in debt. It was not underwater. It had 11 employees, a solid client base, and a commercial lease on Wacker Drive worth considerable money. My brother had invented the financial problems entirely. On the 4th day, he called to tell me the estate administrator form had been declined by the attorney's office because of a signature verification issue. His voice was tight in a way he was trying to hide. "It's probably just a technical thing," he said. "Can you come into the attorney's office tomorrow and sign in front of a notary? Just to clear it up?" "Of course," I said. "Whatever you need." I did not go to the attorney's office. Instead, I filed a formal fraud complaint against the forged will with the probate court, attaching the forensic metadata analysis I had prepared and the authenticated copy of my father's actual estate documents. My attorney filed a concurrent motion to have the forged document examined by the court's own document verification specialist. I also submitted the security footage from my father's house, which showed my brother and his associates in my father's home before I had even been notified of his death, and which showed my sister-in-law removing items from the upstairs bedroom, including my mother's necklace, on the evening before the funeral. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. I did not tell my brother it was happening until 48 hours before, when his attorney of record received the formal notice of proceedings. The call he made to me that afternoon was the most honest conversation we had ever had. He was not performing brotherly concern anymore. He was panicked and furious, and he told me I was destroying our family over money, and that our father would be disgusted with me, and that I had always been selfish and ungrateful and difficult. I listened to all of it without interrupting. When he was done, I said simply, "I'll see you at the hearing," and hung up. What I had not told my brother, and what he discovered approximately 18 hours before we were due in court, was the second layer of the trap I had laid. When I had installed the smart home system in my father's house 3 years ago, I had registered the property address with the system's cloud security protocol under my own account credentials, because I was the one who set it up, and my father had simply never changed the primary administrator. That registration, buried in fine print in the terms of service, meant that I retained co-ownership rights over all data generated by the system, including every recording made on the premises from the day of installation forward. Every conversation that had taken place in my father's home during those 5 days when my brother and his wife and their associates had been there alone, planning and measuring and calling contractors, had been captured in high-definition audio and stored in a secured cloud archive under my name. I had given a complete copy of those recordings to the probate court the week before the hearing. The morning of the hearing was clear and cold, the kind of Chicago October morning that cuts right through a coat. I arrived early, wearing my good charcoal blazer, my father's old wristwatch on my left wrist, the one he had given me the last Christmas we had together. I sat at the respondent's table alone. My probate attorney sat beside me. Across the aisle, my brother sat with his attorney, a soft-spoken man who looked increasingly uncomfortable the longer the morning went on. My sister-in-law was in the gallery, her jaw set hard. My aunt was there too, sitting 2 rows back, her arms crossed over her chest. The hearing opened with my brother's attorney presenting the alternate will. He spoke confidently about my father's documented concern for my well-being and the burden the company would represent for a single woman in a demanding career. He used the phrase in accordance with the testator's final wishes 4 times in 6 minutes. My brother sat beside him nodding slowly, performing grief and reason in equal measure. When it was my turn, I did not raise my voice. I did not make a speech. I opened my folder and I handed the bailiff a series of tabbed documents. The first was the certified estate filing from my father's actual attorney, legally executed 14 months prior, with a notarized authentication certificate and a federal registration timestamp. The second was the forensic metadata report on the forged will, compiled by 2 independent document examiners I had retained, establishing that the document had been created on a consumer-grade word processor 9 days before my father's death and formatted to mimic legal stationery. The third was a signed affidavit from the notary whose stamp appeared on the forged will, stating that she had never notarized any document for my father and that her stamp had been used without her knowledge or consent. The judge, a precise woman in her 60s who looked as though she had seen every variety of family financial fraud that Cook County had to offer, reviewed each document in turn without expression. Then she looked up at my brother's attorney with the specific quality of attention that makes experienced lawyers shift in their seats. My brother's attorney asked for a recess. The judge denied it. "We also have supplementary evidence," my attorney said, standing smoothly. "With the court's permission, I'd like to submit recordings from the security system installed at the decedent's primary residence, covering the period immediately following his death." My brother stood up halfway from his chair before his attorney pulled him back down. The recordings were played through the courtroom's audio system. They were clear. In the first recording, dated the evening of my father's death, my brother's voice could be heard directing one of the polo shirt men to determine the market value of the company and the commercial property, and to have preliminary liquidation paperwork ready within the week. He referred to the estate attorney as a problem we need to route around. In the second recording, my sister-in-law could be heard telling a third party by phone that my brother had taken care of the paperwork situation and that the sale should be able to close within 60 days. In the third recording, my brother could be heard on a phone call saying, very clearly, "She's going to be too wrecked to look closely at anything, just make sure the signature section looks right." The courtroom was very quiet after that. My brother's attorney requested permission to confer with his client. The judge granted him 4 minutes. During those 4 minutes, my brother sat with his head bent close to his attorney's, and I watched my aunt in the gallery slowly uncross her arms and press her hands flat against her thighs. She did not look at my brother. She stared at a fixed point on the wall in front of her, and I recognized the expression on her face because I had worn it myself several times in the past month. It was the expression of someone recalculating everything they thought they knew about a person they loved. When the 4 minutes were up, my brother's attorney stood and said, quietly, that his client wished to withdraw the alternate estate document from consideration. The judge looked at him for a moment over the top of her reading glasses. "Withdrawing it doesn't address the question of how it came to exist," she said. She turned to my attorney. "Does your client intend to pursue the forgery allegation through separate criminal proceedings?" I had thought about this for a long time. I had talked about it with my attorney for several late nights in a row. My brother was not a good man, and he had done a genuinely harmful thing, and part of me wanted every legal consequence that could follow him for the rest of his life. But I had also spent the last month surrounded by legal proceedings and forensic documents, and the cold architecture of institutional justice, and what I wanted more than anything was to be finished. I wanted to go back to my father's house without anyone else's agenda inside it. I wanted to walk through the rooms without calculating what they were worth. I told my attorney to convey that I was reserving the right to pursue criminal charges and leaving that decision open pending the outcome of the civil proceedings. It was not mercy. It was a leash. My brother would spend a long time not knowing whether the phone was about to ring. The judge ruled in my favor on every point of the estate documents. She appointed a neutral administrator to oversee the transition of the business and the property into my name. She also issued a formal note in the court record that the alternate will presented by my brother bore the indicators of fraudulent fabrication and referred the matter to the district attorney's office for review. She did not give my brother the opportunity to make a closing statement. As we filed out of the courtroom, my sister-in-law moved past me in the gallery doorway. She did not speak, but she was not wearing my mother's necklace. I noticed that specifically. Either she had realized at some point that wearing it was a mistake, or she had already sold it. Either way, it was gone, and so was she, 3 seconds later, moving quickly down the marble corridor without looking back. My aunt caught up with me near the elevator. She looked smaller than she had when she sat on my couch holding my hand and telling me to let my brother carry the burden. She asked if we could talk. I told her I would call her when I was ready. I pressed the elevator button and stepped inside and watched the doors close on her face, which was trying very hard to assemble itself into something I would forgive. I stood in the elevator alone and breathed. That was 11 months ago. The company is mine now, legally and completely. I took a leave of absence from my cybersecurity firm to spend 4 months learning the logistics business from the inside, sitting in meetings with the operations manager and the account leads, reading the vendor contracts, understanding the thing my father had built the way you understand a house by walking every room. It is not perfect, and it is not simple, but it is real, and it was built with honest work, and I intend to keep it that way. I kept all 11 employees. I gave them a meeting where I introduced myself as the new owner and told them the transition had been complicated but that their positions were secure. A woman who had been with my father for 9 years started crying. That was the first time I cried in front of anyone since he died. The commercial property on Wacker is under a new management contract. I visit it sometimes just to stand in the lobby and understand that it is mine. My father bought it the year I graduated from college. He brought me to see it the same week, proud in the way he always was when he had made something solid out of nothing. My brother and his wife are going through their own unraveling in ways I only hear about indirectly through people we both know. The district attorney's office sent a notice 6 months ago. I chose not to cooperate with the prosecution. That was my choice to make, and I made it for my own reasons, not for his. I don't need him in a courtroom. I need him not in my life, and that part I have handled completely. My aunt called 3 times over the first month after the hearing. I did not return the calls. I have not spoken to her since I pressed that elevator button. That door is closed, and closing it did not feel like loss. It felt like finally taking something off my back that I had been carrying so long I stopped noticing its weight. I still go to my father's house on Sundays sometimes. Not as often now that I have the company to run, but when I can. I make coffee in his kitchen with the same machine he bought the year I started high school and never upgraded because it worked fine, he always said, and there was no reason to fix what was working. I sit in the chair by the window where he used to sit in the evenings, and I look out at the yard, and I wear his wristwatch on my left wrist, and some Sundays that is enough. Some Sundays it is almost more than enough. My father was not a complicated man, but he was a clear-eyed one. He knew what his children were, both of us, for a long time before he died. He left his life's work to the one who showed up. That is the whole story, really. Underneath all of it, he left it to the one who showed up. If you have ever had to fight for what someone who loved you intended for you to have, I hope you know that fighting does not have to mean losing yourself in the process. The calmest person in the room is usually holding the most. Leave a comment and tell me your story. And if this one meant something to you, please subscribe. There are more stories here, and every single one of them is about finding your way back to solid ground.